I never imagined that something as ordinary as starting university would end up transforming my life in ways I could never have foreseen. When I first stepped onto campus, I was filled with a mix of excitement and apprehension. The sprawling buildings seemed intimidating, and the echo of students' voices only added to my anxiety. It was a new chapter, and I was eager to prove myself. But everything felt so overwhelming: the endless lectures, the constant pressure to meet deadlines, and the relentless workload that left little room for anything else. My days blurred together, each one a cycle of reading, writing, and struggling to keep up. I barely had time to breathe, let alone think about anything beyond surviving each semester. But amidst that whirlwind of academic stress, something unexpected happened, something that would forever change the way I saw the world. It all began the day I met Daniel. Daniel wasn't like anyone I had ever encountered before. He stood out, not just because of his age — he was clearly older than the average university student — but because of the way he carried himself. There was an effortless elegance about him, a quiet confidence that turned heads and commanded attention wherever he went. People didn't just notice him, they gravitated toward him. It wasn't just his wealth, although that was impossible to ignore. He drove sleek cars, wore tailored suits, and carried the kind of accessories you only see in high-end magazines. But there was something more intangible about him, an aura of mystery that made him seem untouchable. First, I dismissed him as just another privileged man living in a completely different world from mine. What could someone like him possibly have in common with me? I was just an ordinary student, living off late-night instant noodles and trying to scrape through exams. My life revolved around textbooks and part-time jobs, not luxury or glamour. I never even considered the possibility that our paths could cross, let alone intertwine. And yet, they did. First, it was subtle. I would notice him at the library, sitting a few tables away, or catch a glimpse of him in the cafeteria as he chatted with someone effortlessly. I thought it was a coincidence, after all. The campus wasn't small, but it wasn't massive either. But then I began to sense a pattern. Wherever I was, Daniel wasn't far behind. His eyes would meet mine across a crowded room, and for a brief moment, felt like time stood still. His gaze wasn't intrusive or overbearing, it was warm, curious, and laced with a quiet intensity that left me both flustered and intrigued. I told myself to focus on my studies, to ignore the magnetic pull I felt whenever he was near. But the more I tried, the harder it became. There was something about him that defied logic, something that made me question everything I thought I knew about myself. Why was he paying attention to me? I wasn't the kind of girl who turned heads. I didn't wear designer clothes or spend hours perfecting my appearance. I was just me, plain, focused, and unremarkable. Yet, every time I looked up, there he was, as if he could see something in me that I couldn't see in myself. One afternoon, as I sat in the courtyard with a book in my lap, lost in thought, I felt his presence before I saw him. It was strange how I could sense him now, almost like his energy filled the space before his physical form did. When I looked up, he was standing a few feet away, his expression softer than usual. He wasn't dressed in his typical designer ensemble, just a simple shirt and jeans, but he still exuded that same quiet charisma. "Hey," he said, his voice calm yet inviting. "Mind if I join you?" I hesitated for a moment, unsure of what to say. Then I nodded. "Sure." As he sat down beside me, the world around us seemed to fade into the background. What began as a polite exchange of pleasantries soon turned into something more meaningful. He asked about my studies, my goals, and even the book I was reading. There was no pretense, no arrogance, just genuine curiosity and warmth. His kindness took me by surprise, and before I knew it, I found myself opening up in a way I rarely did with anyone. Over the next few weeks, Daniel became a fixture in my life. He found small ways to connect with me, whether it was sharing a coffee between classes or walking me to the library after a lecture. Each encounter felt like peeling back another layer of his enigmatic persona. Beneath the polished exterior was a man who was thoughtful, intelligent, and deeply compassionate. He wasn't just the wealthy guy everyone whispered about. He was someone who listened, who cared, and who made me feel seen in a way I hadn't before. One evening, after a particularly challenging day, we found ourselves sitting on a bench overlooking the campus. The sun was setting, painting the sky in hues of orange and pink. I confessed my struggles with balancing my workload and my worries about affording next semester's tuition. To my astonishment, Daniel turned to me with a look of sincerity that took my breath away. "I want to help," he said softly. "Your education is important, and if there's anything I can do to make it easier for you, I will." I was speechless. Part of me wanted to reject his offer, to insist that I could manage on my own, but the way he spoke, the genuine care in his voice, made it impossible to doubt his intentions. He wasn't trying to flaunt his wealth or make me feel indebted. He simply wanted to support me. It was a kindness I hadn't expected, and it left an indelible mark on my heart. Looking back, meeting Daniel was more than just a chance encounter. It was the beginning of a journey that taught me about vulnerability, trust, and the surprising ways life can bring people together. He saw something in me when I couldn't see it myself, and in doing so, he changed not only my world but also the way I viewed myself. After much thought and inner conflict, I ultimately decided to accept his offer. I rationalized it by telling myself that it was merely for my studies, a temporary arrangement with no emotional entanglements. At the time, I had no inkling of how profoundly that single decision would transform the course of my life. From the very moment I agreed, Daniel's generosity seemed boundless, almost overwhelming. He didn't stop at paying for my tuition fees. He went far beyond that. He filled my wardrobe with clothes I could never afford, whisked me away on luxurious trips to places I had only dared to dream of, and ensured I had the money for all the necessities I had long gone without. It felt surreal, like stepping into a fairy tale where every wish was granted without hesitation. Initially, I found it unsettling, almost too good to be true, as though I were living someone else's life. Suddenly, my worries about how I would scrape together money for the next semester or afford basic daily needs disappeared. Daniel had seamlessly taken over those burdens. All it took was a simple phone call or a text message, and my problems were resolved. Gradually, I began to acclimate to this new reality, a life where the suffocating weight of financial struggles was lifted from my shoulders. For the first time in years, I felt liberated. The relentless pressure of making ends meet was replaced with an easy, almost carefree existence. Yet, I constantly reminded myself to stay grounded. This was not my fairy tale. It was Daniel's generosity, pure and simple. He chose to help me, and I was endlessly grateful for it. I refrained from letting my mind wander into dangerous territory. It was just an arrangement, nothing more, nothing less. At the heart of it, the terms were simple. I received financial support, while Daniel enjoyed my companionship. It was a transaction, devoid of emotional strings or expectations. At least, that's what I told myself. I was determined to keep it professional, to maintain clear boundaries. But the longer we spent together, the more I noticed subtle shifts in our dynamic. Daniel's attachment to me seemed to deepen with each passing day. While he never said it outright, his actions spoke volumes. And deep down, I found myself questioning everything I once believed about our arrangement. Life, however, has a way of disrupting even the best laid plans. Just a few months into our arrangement, something unexpected happened. I began feeling strange, unusually tired, nauseous, and out of sync with my body. Initially, I chalked it up to stress from school or perhaps an upset stomach. But as days turned into weeks and my period still didn't come, a gnawing worry took root in my mind. I tried to convince myself it was a delay, nothing more. But an unshakable fear gripped me. Reluctantly, I bought a pregnancy test, my hands trembling as I held it. Taking the test felt like an act of courage. And when the results appeared, two unmistakable pink lines, I was left breathless. The reality hit me with staggering force. I was pregnant. Disbelief consumed me. I took additional tests, each one confirming the same outcome. I couldn't fathom how this had happened. Daniel had always been careful, or so I thought. Panic surged through me as I realized the magnitude of the situation. I wasn't ready to be a mother. I wasn't ready for the responsibilities, the consequences, the life-altering changes this would bring. For days, I was paralyzed with fear, unable to think clearly or make a decision. The questions came relentlessly, each one more overwhelming than the last. Should I keep the baby? Could I? Or should I quietly go to a clinic and terminate the pregnancy? The enormity of the choice left me in tears, sobbing into the quiet of my room as my thoughts spiraled. Eventually, I mustered the courage to tell Daniel. My heart pounded as I sat him down one evening, struggling to find the words. When I finally told him I was pregnant, I braced myself for the worst: anger, rejection, disappointment. But Daniel's response was nothing I had anticipated. He listened quietly, his expression serious but devoid of hostility. When I finished, he let out a long sigh and said, "This changes everything." What followed left me speechless. Daniel revealed a side of his life he had never shared before. He had a wife and children. He explained that while he couldn't abandon his family, he also didn't want to abandon me or the baby. And then he proposed something that completely upended my world. He suggested I become his second wife. The idea was incomprehensible. A second wife felt like a cruel twist of fate, a role I could never imagine myself accepting. How could I, a young university student with no clear direction, navigate such a complex and unconventional arrangement? How could I share a man with another woman and children? The thought alone was overwhelming, but Daniel was adamant. He painted a picture of stability, assuring me that I would be supported and cared for, that I wouldn't have to sacrifice the life I had grown accustomed to. Still, I couldn't ignore the nagging feeling that I was being offered a gilded cage. Would I lose my independence, my identity, my dreams, in exchange for comfort and security? Could I accept this life and still be true to myself? The questions loomed over me like a dark cloud. I was at a crossroads, facing a decision that would redefine everything I thought I knew about my life, my future, and the person I wanted to be. One thing was certain: there was no turning back. The days that followed were a whirlwind of emotions, leaving me restless and overwhelmed. Daniel's proposition played over and over in my mind, an offer as alluring as it was complex. A life of comfort, security, and wealth was undeniably tempting, especially with the challenges I knew I was about to face. But each time I leaned into the fantasy, I was jolted back by the glaring reality of what accepting his offer would truly mean. Would I become a shadow of who I was, reduced to a footnote in someone else's grand narrative? Would I be just another ornament in his world of opulence, devoid of my own voice, my own identity? As the questions piled up, I realized this decision wasn't simply about choosing between two paths. It was about the kind of life I wanted to live and the values I wanted to uphold. And then there were the secrets that clung to me like shadows, whispering of the devastation they could bring if revealed. What if his wife discovered the truth? What if society caught wind of our forbidden relationship? The scandal alone could rip both our lives apart, leaving nothing but rubble in its wake. I could already hear the whispers, the sharp-edged judgments from strangers who would know nothing of the love we shared but everything about the mistakes we made. Despite the risks, my heart ached for Daniel. He had a way of making me feel seen, cherished in a way I hadn't experienced before. His kindness, his unwavering attention, and the warmth he showed me made it impossible to dismiss him entirely. There was a depth to our connection that transcended logic, a bond that made the world feel a little less lonely. But was love enough to justify everything else? Enough to withstand the sacrifices it demanded? I couldn't ignore the life I had worked so hard to build. Every late-night study session, every hurdle I overcame to stand on my own, it all mattered too much to me. I had carved out a place for myself in a world that wasn't always kind or forgiving, and I wasn't sure I could trade it all for a life that wasn't truly my own. Yet, the thought of raising a child alone, without Daniel's support, sent a wave of fear crashing over me. Could I shoulder the burden alone, without the safety net he offered? Days turned into nights of restless deliberation, each moment more agonizing than the last. In the end, clarity found me, not in a moment of epiphany, but in the quiet resolve that grew as I reflected on who I was, and who I wanted to be. I chose independence. I chose me. I couldn't tether myself to a life where my choices would always be second to someone else's. I couldn't live in the shadow of wealth that came with too great a cost. When I told Daniel, the pain in his eyes mirrored my own. It was a heartbreak we shared, an unspoken understanding that, despite our love, this was the only way forward. He respected my decision, even though it tore us apart. As we parted ways, I felt the weight of my choice pressing down on me, but beneath it was a glimmer of something stronger: pride. I had chosen a path that honored my dreams and my dignity, even if it meant walking it alone. The months that followed tested me in ways I could never have imagined. Raising a child on my own was daunting. Every day a balancing act between caring for my baby and managing the demands of my life. There were nights when exhaustion claimed me, when doubt whispered that I had made the wrong choice. What if I had accepted Daniel's offer? What if I had chosen the easier road? One lined with luxury and stability? But even in my hardest moments, I knew the answer. No amount of comfort could replace the sense of purpose I felt in standing on my own 2 feet. My independence was priceless, a testament to the strength I hadn't realized I possessed. Each day brought new challenges, but with them came the unwavering love of my child, a love that anchored me and gave my life a new kind of meaning. As time passed, I found solace in the quiet victories of motherhood. Every milestone my child reached was a reminder that I was capable, that I could build a life worth living even without the safety net of Daniel's world. I learned to rely on myself in ways I never had before, and in doing so, I discovered a resilience that had been there all along, waiting to be unleashed. The path I chose wasn't easy, and there were moments when I wondered if the struggle was worth it. But with every step forward, I grew more certain that I had made the right decision. My life, though far from perfect, was mine to shape, mine to own, and that was worth more than any promise of luxury or ease. Looking back now, I see a woman who refused to settle, who chose courage over convenience, and who found her strength in the face of uncertainty. I don't regret my choice, because it led me here to a life where I am free, where I am proud, and where I am building a future on my terms. And that, more than anything else, is the greatest luxury of all. Thank you for taking the time to watch our videos, and especially subscribe to the channel so you don't miss any new videos. Our channel will always update interesting content. Thank you and see you in the next videos.